We review the 2013 Florida legislative session and discuss the future of the Sunshine State. Tonight, we are live and interactive on television and on radio. Legislative Review, dialogue with the delegation, is straight ahead.
This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
And a very pleasant good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you for joining us. In addition to our television broadcast on WSRE, our program is being simulcast on News Radio 1620. In recent years, legislators have gone to Tallahassee facing a mountain of budgetary challenges, thanks to a housing bust and the national economic storm that became known as the Great Recession. But in 2013, a wave of optimism flowed over Tallahassee as Florida's economy demonstrated genuine signs of improvement. Tonight, we'll review this year's session and discuss Florida's future with members of the Northwest Florida Legislative Delegation. Your questions are encouraged, either by phone or email. You can call in and ask your questions off the air at 850-484-1223 or toll free at 1-800-239-WSRE. Email questions to questions@wsre.org. But first this evening, we would like to take a moment to honor the memory of Representative Clay Ford. He was the District 2 representative in the Florida House of Representatives. Representative Ford was elected by special election in 2007. He served until his death in March of this year. Clay Ford had a diverse career that spanned politics, the military, and the private sector. In the 1970s, he served in the Arkansas legislature. He would go on to hold various positions in municipal government prior to being elected to the Florida House. He was a practicing attorney, a retired colonel in the United States Army Reserves, and of course, he was a representative. Florida House Speaker Will Weatherford called Ford the consummate gentleman of the House. Our condolences to Representative Clay Ford's family and a special thank you for his military and public service. Representative Clay Ford was 74 years old. We are joined this evening by Florida Senate President Don Gaetz. Senate President Gaetz represents District 1, which includes Bay, Holmes, Jackson, Washington, and parts of Okaloosa counties. Senator Gaetz' colleague in the Senate, Senator Greg Evers, was unable to join us this evening. Senator Evers represents District 2, which covers parts of Escambia and Santa Rosa and also Okaloosa counties. From the Florida House of Representatives, Clay Ingram, representing District 1, which includes parts of Escambia County. District 3's representative, Doug Broxson. District 3 covers parts of Okaloosa and Santa Rosa counties. From District 4, Representative Matt Gaetz. District 4 covers parts of Okaloosa County. Unfortunately, Representative Gaetz has been delayed due to a traffic situation on Highway 98 and may not be able to make it this evening, although his intentions were to join us and perhaps still will if time allows. District 2, which covers parts of both Escambia and Santa Rosa counties, had been held by Clay Ford until his passing in March. This past Tuesday, a special election was held to fill that seat. Republican Mike Hill was elected and will be the new District 2 representative. We look forward to having him join us for future discussions. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out this evening. Senator Gaetz, I will begin with you, and let me kind of ask you a broad, wide-ranging question. The biggest accomplishment coming out of 2013's Florida legislative session?
Well, thanks, Jeff, for having us here and for asking that question. If I might, before I answer that, let me just join with people across Northwest Florida who still mourn our dear friend Clay Ford. Clay and Carol had the love affair of a lifetime. She'll always be a great lady of the Florida House of Representatives, and we miss Clay terribly. We're looking forward to welcoming Mike Hill to the Florida House and the legislature. We know he'll do a very good job, and that'll round out our delegation. It seems to me that this year we had the opportunity to either follow the example of other states like New Jersey and New York and Illinois, where taxes were raised and where budgets were bloated, or we could do what Washington did and borrow money and be dysfunctional and not get anything done. But instead, the Florida legislature, under the leadership of Speaker Will Weatherford and this delegation here in Northwest Florida, balanced the budget, lived within the means of the state, met the critical needs of the state, provided a pay increase to state workers for the first time in 7 years, increased education funding and teacher salaries, and did it all without raising taxes by one single dime. And we did it for about half of what it cost the state of New York, which is about the same size as Florida, to meet its needs. So I think the good news is Florida is doing what Washington isn't and what other big states can't, and that is we're pointing toward prosperity. At the same time, we're doing it with responsible spending and responsible taxation.
Was there one particular thing that came out of this year's session that you go, wow, that's a huge accomplishment for us. That's something we're extremely proud of?
Well, Jeff, I think that the ethics reform legislation that the House and the Senate passed, it was called by the press the most sweeping ethics reform in 38 years in our state, stands out. It was my #1 priority as President of the Senate. Speaker Weatherford joined me in that priority. We need to raise the standard of public conduct in local government and in state government, and we did that with a series of reforms that eliminated political slush funds, eliminated the revolving door between the lobbying corps and the legislature, ensured that we would have legislative salaries and legislative financial records open to the public for their review, and also made sure that if we had people who violated ethics and elections laws, that they would be treated the same way as ordinary citizens, and that is be held accountable. This year, Jeff, we wrote off, state of Florida wrote off $850,000 in uncollected and uncollectible fines assessed against politicians who violated ethics and elections laws. Because of these gentlemen in the House of Representatives and our colleagues in the Senate and Governor Scott who signed the law, that's no longer possible. It's no longer legal. Now, if you violate ethics or elections laws, we'll sanction your public salary and make you pay. Just like everybody else, politicians ought to be held accountable for their actions. So I'm proud that we've raised the standard of ethical conduct for local officials and state officials. Long overdue, but the right thing to do.
Very good. Representative Ingram, would you like to add to
Jeff,
that?
hey, well, first of all, I mean, it's so obvious, but we're so fortunate to have the Senate president, from our local delegation. And I want to say this, that probably the biggest win that the Panhandle had happened before session was even gavelled in, and that was nearly $1 billion investment that the Department of Transportation made in Northwest Florida, namely, or the crown jewel of that investment is the replacement of the 3-mile bridge. There was talk that there would be a toll. It would become a toll bridge, which is commonplace in other parts of the state. Not practical here. It's would be a tax or aggressive tax on people that least able to afford that tax. And so we as politically, it would be nice for all of us to be able to sort of claim that as a victory, and of course we do, but it just would not have happened without Senator Gaetz' leadership, and that being probably the biggest thing that's happened here in quite some time. I just wanted to make sure that we gave Senator Gaetz his due to use his clout to get that done for all of us. It's something that'll have a lasting impact in Northwest Florida for years and years to come.
Well, and let me jump back to you, Senator Gaetz, for a second. I know everyone in Northwest Florida was extremely excited about that. How did that come about?
Well, as President of the Senate, I do have the opportunity and obligation to sign off on major transportation packages. And so the Secretary of Transportation, who's a great guy, came to me and said, look, we've got this transportation package for next year, and here's everything that we're going to be doing. And I looked at it and said, I don't see much here for Northwest Florida. And, I quoted Tip O'Neill. I said, I'm against any deal that I'm not part of. And I said, it's important for us here in Northwest Florida to get some of our own tax dollars back. Jeff, whether it's foster care or health care or education or transportation, it isn't just our feeling. It's a fact that oftentimes we've been overlooked here in the Central Time Zone. So working with Doug Broxson and Clay Ingram and Matt Gaetz and the late Clay Ford and with Senator Evers, we put together a plan to bring $970 million worth of infrastructure needs met to Northwest Florida through the Department of Transportation, a new Pensacola Bay Bridge being, as Clay said, the crown jewel of that. But it was because we were able to use a little bit of leverage, gained because people across Florida were willing to elect a guy from the Panhandle to be Senate President. But believe me, that's a team thing. We couldn't have done it without the active support of everybody in the delegation. And Senator Evers isn't here tonight, but he is a key player in the Appropriations Committee that oversees transportation funding. And believe me, he put his big shoulder into this issue.
And I'll throw this up to either the three of you here. Any idea on what sort of economic impact that will have in Northwest Florida over the next decade?
I would imagine it's difficult for us to quantify right now, what the positive impact will be. I know it'll be huge, but I think you can imagine what the negatives would be if, a server at a restaurant in Gulf Breeze that lives in Pensacola, has to pay a $2 or $3 toll every time he goes to work. At what point, that's a gallon of gas or nearabouts. And so at what point does it really start to affect commerce? There's no doubt that it would. And so the positive impact is going to be huge. We know that. There are construction jobs and that sort of thing. But then you just can look at what would happen if we told that. And I just think it would essentially bring commerce to a standstill along 98.
I think it would have been a devastation for people in the south end of Santa Rosa. Think about it. We're a bedroom community. We go to Pensacola at least once a day. It's our lifeline. And to think of adding that burden to really a constituency is already under a great burden. I calculated in many cases it'd be $1,000 a year just for the toll, and that would have been a real strain on our economy, plus the gas, plus the inconvenience. And there was a possibility of tolling one way and not the other because Escambia County has a different tax structure than Santa Rosa. So when Senator Gaetz announced that, you could hear a roar throughout the whole community that that was a legacy issue. And it would have divided two counties. It would have divided a county inside of a county. So it was monumental that we did that, and it sent a signal that when you have strong leadership, and we're very fortunate that we have a senator like Senator Gaetz that is paying the price. I mean, I don't think he's seen home in probably 6 months, but that's what it takes to have an effective leader, is someone willing to pay the price to do what's right for his own constituency.
I would think also just the economic impact of the pure construction of it has got to be huge for Northwest Florida.
No doubt about it. And I think one of the greatest things about the project is that it's, you hear the horror stories from Washington of the pork barrel spending and things like that. But the beauty of this project is that it is one of the pure and, constitutional functions of government to provide infrastructure. And so it's something that's needed and it's real. It's not some pork barrel project that you typically hear about. And that's what's beautiful about that bridge in particular.
Yeah, I was talking about real infrastructure. I don't think many people in Northwest Florida would argue the fact that in fact is needed. So congratulations to you guys on that. 484-1223 is the number you can call in and ask your question off the air. If you're outside the immediate dialing area, 1-800-239-WSRE is the toll-free number. Or if you would rather, email us questions at WSRE.org, and we will certainly try to get your question on the air. I'm going to move on to something, and I want to bring this up because this comes in from a viewer, and obviously there's an awful lot of talk, not just on the local and state level, but on the national level, the Affordable Health Care Act, also known as Obamacare. And the question comes in, please explain your refusal to support Governor Scott and the expansion of Medicaid. So I'll throw that up, jump ball.
I could speak for the House, and I know the Senate had a different position, but we took a fundamental difference in that in 1968, the federal government, Florida was one of the last 3 states to opt in to Medicaid. They predicted that it would be 2% of our budget. The next year, Governor Askew called special session to have a tax increase to take care of the overage that was already seen in the budget. Now we're at about 31% of our budget. And frankly, our dilemma is that we cannot match a Florida dollar, which is 100 pennies, with a federal dollar, which is 47 cents. And we know with the construction that's happening in Washington, we're going to see cutbacks, and Florida simply cannot afford to pick up what they have obligated for us. It will completely devastate our education system, our transportation. Everything that we find good in Florida will be sucked up by that program. So we said, and Will Weatherford said, We were going to burn the boats. We were going to stand on principle, and we did it. And I think we're sending a message to the other 20 states that we're standing with them, and hopefully it will send a message to Washington.
Yeah, well said. And then, one of the arguments we often hear is that the expansion of Medicaid would be fully funded by the federal government for a period of time, and then slowly reduced down to 85 or 90% after 3 years. I think the problem with that logic is, the sequester is a perfect example of why I don't think we can stake Florida's financial future on hopes that the federal government will fund something for any length of time. And so that's another reason I don't feel like it's the right thing to do to expand Medicaid with borrowed federal dollars. That's money that we're borrowing as a federal government. It's not like we have it in the bank anyway.
So the House was pretty much totally against it, as I understand it, and this certainly may have changed in recent line of thinking, but the Senate basically said, we're interested in taking the money, but not so much for Medicaid. We want it for citizens to be able to buy private insurance. Now, is that a good assumption on that?
That's a fair statement. But also, I think the Senate agreed with the House that we could not trust the federal government to always be there to keep its commitments, even if the feds meant their commitments. And as Clay Ingram just said, sequester is a perfect example. We've got National Guardsmen right now deployed in war zones who are being handed notices telling them, welcome home in a few weeks, boys, and you're going to go on furlough and we're going to cut your pay by 20%. And that's our national defense. Not being able to pay our National Guardsmen, not being able to pay other obligations that the federal government meant to pay, but because they can't balance a budget, because they're totally dysfunctional, because they're disorganized, and they just aren't able to meet their obligations. And so we can't be dependent upon that. Now, what the Senate said was, we don't like Medicaid as a current system. Taxpayers don't like it. Patients don't like it because you can't find a doctor often. Providers don't like Medicaid because it's more trouble sometimes than it's worth to collect Medicaid payments from the government. And so what we proposed was junking the current Medicaid system, and as you indicated, Jeff, providing assistance to people to buy into the private insurance market, but to buy insurance that they would need. Some folks who might be in their 20s don't necessarily need the same kind of insurance that I need in my 60s. Not too many people in their 20s are going to contemplate long-term care insurance, for example. But the federal government said, no, it's got to be all or nothing. You've got to provide a full 1 million additional people on Medicaid. You've got to provide all the covered services. You've got to take all the financial responsibility and trust us that we're going to be your partner. And there's not going to be any innovation at the state level. Well, as Representative Broxson just indicated, 20 states have already said, look, we'd like to do something for somebody. We'd like more people to get more care. But we certainly would like to have an opportunity to innovate at the state level. And so far, the Obama administration has said, no, it's got to be a federal straitjacket or nothing. So I think the next move is up to Washington. We're asking our congressional delegation to go to the floor of the U.S. House and Senate and get us some flexibility along with, half the rest of the country. When half of the country says this isn't working, then it's time to retool it and give the states that are laboratories of innovation an opportunity to look at some of the ideas the House had, some of the ideas the Senate had. Everybody in Tallahassee wants to do more in terms of health care coverage, but we want to have a Florida solution that we can afford and that will actually work.
So where does it stand right now? So basically nothing is happening right now. So where's the line in the sand where something has to happen one way or the other?
Well, there is no line in the sand particularly. If nothing happens, then everybody who is on the current failed Medicaid system would stay on it. That would be unfortunate. That's why we want to have flexibility. But no more people would be on Medicaid. And that would be, I guess walking away from the opportunity to provide more coverage. But the governor's taken one position. He agrees with President Obama. He wants to have an expansion of Medicaid as we know it. The House has said that they distrust the federal government's capability or willingness to meet their commitments, and I think the House is standing on good ground to be skeptical. The Senate said we're willing to provide premium assistance to buy into the private market, but we want some flexibility. So Speaker Weatherford and I have been traveling together for the last several days, have been talking in the backseat of the car about, how can we work together and come up with some kind of solution that'll work for Florida. But the next move is up to the federal government to give us the flexibility to do that.
As you travel around, I'm curious, what sort of feedback are you getting? And certainly you gentlemen jump in as well. What's the business community telling you about Obamacare? I want to make this a kind of a double-barrel question. Number one, what's the business community telling you about it? And number two, what are the hospitals and the medical facilities telling you?
Well, the business community, and I defer to my colleagues here, the business community, I think, is perplexed. I'm a small business person. I sign 142 paychecks on the front side every Friday right here in Pensacola. And I can tell you that in our company, we're trying to figure out what are the costs going to be. I was talking with a fast food franchise owner in this area just recently, and he said that he feels that the costs of the imposed covered services are going to drive up his costs of product and drive up his costs of labor, and he's afraid he won't be competitive. So, and Blue Cross of Florida has already come to us and said, look, the standard plan that we provide may go up by as much as 50 or 60% in cost to consumers because of the obligations of Obamacare. You know, we're getting all kinds of messages of confusion and distress from the business community. Now, you know, those who stand to get more money, hospitals and other providers, are saying, you know, take all the money you can get and please send it to us. And the reason is because they have unreimbursed care that they have to deal with on their balance sheet. They have folks who come in the emergency room who can't pay. So we can't do nothing. That's part of the reason why this legislature has funded 57 primary care centers across the state, and we need probably to fund 157 more so that people who are uninsured or underinsured don't use the hospital emergency room, which is costly and creates a cost shift onto people who pay for their insurance. Instead, we can have them go to primary care centers and get less expensive and more appropriate care.
Jeff, I know we have other subjects, but if we spent the rest of our time on this issue, it would be too little. We have got to come up with a formula that makes sense. You know, we teach our kids that 2 and 2 equals 4, but it doesn't equal 20 or 30. We have $60 trillion of unfunded liability in Medicare. You can't live under those kind of terms. And they're trying to pass these on to states that are balanced budgets that say we're going to be responsible for the income that we have in. We will never spend more than we bring in. And we're dealing with a federal partner that says we're going to spend it now and think about it later. It's an issue that's going to be, you asked your question in the beginning, what is the biggest issue next year or the year after? It's going to be the same issue because this is waiting on the sidelines to consume our entire state budget, and we cannot afford for it to happen. And Will Weatherford and Don Gaetz have said that will not happen in the state of Florida, and that's a good message. It's a painful message because there will be people that will feel hurt, but it will be the right thing that allows us to be viable for the future.
Representative Ingram, did you want to add?
I mean, the only thing I think that we could reiterate would be that, you know, the Medicaid system is so flawed, so broken, you know, so riddled with fraud. I mean, I just think the worst thing we do would be to expand that program. I mean, and when you look at what could happen, you know, with a complete, you know, Obamacare everywhere scenario, you know, reimbursements go down with Medicaid and Medicare constantly. You just can imagine the quality of care would eventually go down. Doctors, you know, may eventually opt not to see patients on some, you know, like in the NHS and in Britain and things like that. And so hopefully our decision to stand strong will pay off and we'll come up with a solution. More primary care centers, keep people out of ERs and things of that nature. And so I'm sort of proud of our stance. Although it's somewhat painful right now to stand firm, I think it's the right thing to do.
And Jeff, if I might just add one thing, and that is that it's not that the legislature is doing nothing. We're doing plenty in terms of additional dollars for Medicaid. You know, as Doug says, it's a flawed system. As Clay says, it's riddled with corruption, and we need to improve on it. But the other thing that we did do this year is we continued the medical residency program initiative through Sacred Heart Medical Center, an initiative which I had a hand in starting 2 years ago to provide residency programs for physicians to serve particularly our rural areas and in primary care. And we know that physicians practice where they do their residencies. And that bill sits on the governor's desk right now to extend that important residency program. We hope the governor will sign it. But see, here's one of the things. You can hand 1 million more people Medicaid cards, but if there aren't doctors able and willing to care for them, then it is a cruel joke played on poor people who have health care problems. So we need the medical infrastructure. We need the governor to sign the legislation that we've put on his desk to expand and extend and continue these residency programs. And we need to do that as well as figuring out how to provide more coverage.
All right, very good. Let me kind of stay sort of in the same ballpark here. Once again, a question from a viewer, and the question is, when are you going to provide adequate assistance to the mentally ill, especially those who are homeless? And I'll throw that up to whoever would like to start.
One of the things that we were able to do this year is there was a plan that was to close down the Milton Center, and Representative Ingram and Senator Gaetz stood up against that, and that center will not be closed. I think what happened up north with the tragedy that happened there sent a strong message that we've got to do a better job of taking care of those folks that are mentally ill, and we're going to do that. The thing is that we have to find a way to pay for it, and we're in a system. The reason that the Republicans are in control in Tallahassee is that we've held a line on spending. We spend only on what's necessary, and we're going to continue to do that, but we are going to look for ways to take care of those folks.
Jeff, some of the agencies that deal with mental health and other disabilities, the ADP, for example, Agency for Persons with Disabilities, had overspent their budget when Governor Scott was elected, had been overspending to the tune of $60 million a year. Mm-hmm. And so it was very painful at first to take an agency that had been overspending, not living within its means, not serving those individuals it was supposed to serve, to rein it in, to clean house. Now it's more of a well-oiled, well-functioning machine. Better serving those, with less money, serving those that it needs to serve. And so that was a painful period, that first year or two, to correct the mistakes that agency had been making. That's been corrected, and I think that we got through that period of difficulty, and now I think that community will be significantly better served because of that reform within that agency.
And Governor Scott proposed additional funding that would eliminate the waiting list for services for people with developmental disabilities. And the three of us voted for, and we passed a budget to eliminate that waiting list so that these, vulnerable Floridians could get help. More money was spent, more resources are going into mental health than ever before in this budget, even though it's a balanced budget and we lived within our means and didn't raise taxes 1 penny on any business or any family. We still provided more funding for mental health than we have before. Now, we put in the budget money for homeless shelters and money for housing and services for homeless veterans and women and children. For example, there was a homeless shelter that deals with a lot of veterans and frankly, people who have mental difficulties in Okaloosa County. Sadly, the governor vetoed that provision, but we're going to put it back in the budget next year and give him another chance at it. But we put $150,000 in the budget for a veterans court that often deals with veterans who have mental disorders or brain injuries of some sort so that we can triage them out of the criminal justice system, and if they're not a danger to themselves or somebody else, treat them in a different and more humane way. And your viewer ought to know that this is a legislature that's committed to doing more and doing it more effectively. But Representative Broxson is right. It has to be done within fiscal discipline so that we can afford to do it and not extract any more money than necessary from the cash registers and pockets of Florida taxpayers.
Let me throw one more, and this is another viewer question that was just handed to me, and then we'll move on to a different topic. But the question is, regardless of Medicaid's problems, poor people need health care. And this person says, why won't you help the poor? That's coming from a viewer, so I don't know. I think we've fairly well covered the situation, but if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Well, the fact is that we're putting more money into Medicaid this next year than we ever have in the state's history. So we're helping the poor to the tune of about $23 billion this year. And as Representative Broxson has indicated, Medicaid has become metastatic in terms of crowding out other parts of the budget. It's disingenuous to say that we're not doing anything for the poor or people who need health care and can't afford it. The policy question is the current Medicaid system that poor people don't really like, patients find impossible to deal with, and providers find difficulty managing, is that the system we ought to expand, or should we expand some other innovative solution like the ones proposed in the Senate and the House that the federal government won't even let us try to innovate on? That's the policy question. The question is not, are we going to help poor people, and are we going to help poor people who are sick? We're doing more for them if money equals help than ever before.
All right. Let's talk about...
I want to just say that one of the saddest things that we had a pay increase for our state workers, first time in 7 years. Mm-hmm. And that was $1,400 for the average worker. $1,400 is not a lot of money.
Right.
In that same 7 years, Medicaid went up 47%. There was their increase. It foretells the problems we're going to have if we do not take and make the tough decisions. We will not have the money to do the good things we need to do for our state workers, our teachers, our system that works. And it's a tough issue that we've taken, and we're going to continue to stay on course.
Let me throw this out here, and we'll just get a quick answer from both of you, but it seems to me like there's a huge disconnect between Washington and the states. How can we do a better job of the states communicating with Washington to make things kind of have more of a lubricated way of doing things as opposed to a constant?
I think we try our best to communicate. I mean, we in Florida, we have a balanced budget amendment in our Constitution, and we live within our means, and it's just so frustrating, I think, to see, the politicians in Washington, D.C. spending with no regard to the, consequences of that spending. Almost, most of it now, especially the entitlement spending, is borrowed, and that's just so disappointing. And I think we try everything we can to as voters, as citizens, to try to stop that, and it's very frustrating to see that happen.
We can wait around, Jeff, for the federal government to solve problems and to get self-discipline. Frankly, I don't know that I can wait that long. And so Speaker Weatherford made a statement today in Pensacola saying that we're just not going to wait for the federal government. We're going to try to solve problems that we can solve within our scope of responsibility. That's why we're taking the lead in developing a stronger code of ethics than Congress would ever impose on itself. It's why we passed a Career and Professional Education Act that lashes our education system, K-12 as well as higher education system, to the realities and the opportunities in the economy so that students are earning industry certifications embedded into their educations, both K-12 and higher education. It's why we're doing the things that we're doing, because frankly, we can't wait for Washington. Washington's failed, and Florida is growing. We're having 1,000 people a day, again, coming to Florida. Businesses are coming to Florida. New opportunities for growth and jobs are coming here to Northwest Florida. If we waited around for the federal government, we'd look like Illinois, where the special session of the legislature is going on now, where they have a pension system that's $100 billion in arrears, and they're having to raise taxes and cut education and cut health care and cut critical services in order to fund a failed pension system. That's the Washington way. Frankly, I mean, we can send them letters, we can meet with them and suggest to them what we think they ought to do, but we really have to take responsibility here in Florida and do things the Florida way.
Let's talk about education. We have a fair amount of questions on education this evening, but as we look back at the 2013 session, lots of talk about education, definitely some activity there. The high point.
Well, we have $1 billion more that we've sent to education this year. It's been a tough 3 years. But now we sent a strong statement to our superintendents and school boards that they have money to spend to give teachers raises and to do things that they couldn't do before. We're committed to education. This morning I had an opportunity to listen to Senator Gaetz talk about the great things that is happening in Florida in education. We are committed to being not only #1 in job growth, but #1 in quality education to make sure that people that graduated from our system either have a job possibility or are certified to go to college. That's a great state, and it sends a strong statement back to our teachers.
Let me jump in with a viewer question. And by the way, if you have a question, 484-1223, you can call in and ask the question off the air or toll free at 800-239-WSRE, or feel free to email the question to questions@wsre.org. A viewer asked the question, though, why do our local legislative officials pass educational bills without consulting with school and district officials? Why are they blindly following the Jeb Bush privatization of education movement without coming out and being honest about the hidden agenda and their real efforts? So that's
I wonder what that viewer really thinks. Yeah. Well, first of all,
words a little, huh?
It's presumptive to suggest that that we cast votes in Tallahassee without talking to teachers, without talking to parents, and without talking to school board members. That's simply not true in my case, and I know it's not true in Doug or in Clay's case or in Matt Gaetz's case. I talked with teachers and with parents and with school officials. I was in front of the Bay County School Board talking with them just the day before yesterday. So that's simply not true. What is true is that this year, Escambia County Schools got more than $15 million in additional funds compared to last year. What's true is that Santa Rosa County got $9 million more compared to last year. What's true is that Okaloosa County got $12 million more than they did last year. And as Doug Broxson just said, we earmarked a good share of that for increases in teacher salaries. And, you know, I don't know about Jeb Bush's secret agenda. I know this, that because Jeb Bush insisted on accountability, on high standards, on keeping track of how we're doing, we went from near the bottom of the pack in this country in educational performance to near the top of the pack. I'm proud to be a Jeb Bush acolyte on education.
Either you gentlemen like to add to?
Well, I certainly met with superintendents prior to the session and heard their issues. They were concerned about having a diploma that certifies that our students would be going to college, and they weren't college ready. We solved that. Building debt that they could never pay, that would never be released. And we're listening and we're doing things, and it's showing up in the classroom. So I, with Senator Gaetz, am very proud of what we've done. I think it's a good statement to our constituents that we're very sensitive to what's happening in our 67 counties.
Yeah.
I think some of the things that I've just picked up over the years of talking with folks in the education field is one of the things that they're concerned about, and rightfully so, understanding, is maybe having too much emphasis placed on test scores. And, you know, maybe you're in a situation where there are some factors that the teacher can control. You can be a great teacher and do the best you can, but you're limited of maybe what sort of background your students are coming from. You don't know what the student went through the night before, what they're having to deal with on a personal level. So I guess the question becomes, is too much emphasis placed on those FCAT scores?
Well, let me just say, as a former superintendent of schools in Okaloosa County, I can tell you that schools and school districts that obsess about the FCAT generally do the worst on the FCAT. We had a lot of help from great teachers and great parents in Okaloosa. I certainly, just was a minor player, but we went from 27th in the state academically to the top performing school district in Florida history 4 years in a row, not by obsessing about the FCAT, but by teaching to high standards, providing extra help to struggling students, identifying and recognizing those teachers who came early, who stayed late, who took on tough challenges, and that's how we got better, not by obsessing about a test. But there's some people who say, well, if we could just get rid of the FCAT, then everything would be better. I'll get rid of the FCAT as soon as we take down the football scoreboards in all of our high schools. When you're not keeping score, you don't care what the score is and how performance is. There's nothing wrong with scoreboarding, but we shouldn't obsess about one test. All year long, we should teach to high standards and use effective teaching methods. The test will take care of itself.
And of course, the key to a lot of that is getting high-quality teachers in position.
Absolutely.
And I know this past year, this past session, Governor Scott pretty much wanted to do across-the-board raise, and I believe the legislature said, okay, we're going to give you some money, but we're going to have a few strings on it. You guys want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. Yes. Like with any other career, there's any job you can imagine having, there's going to be it's based on merit, and so that was the process through which that the House chose to go. It was actually already in statute that there was a mechanism there to measure, and so I think that's the main reason. Once that was identified, we realized we had enough money to fund a raise. I think that's the reason we went that direction to yes, have some of it as a bonus, and then another amount as a merit bonus, and so. I think that's a good way to go. It incentivizes, greatness and success.
Besides money, what can we do to get more young people to want to be teachers?
Well, you have to respect teachers. Every study that's been done shows that money's important. Teachers have to be able to live, and we need to pay teachers more. That's why the governor was right to insist on more money for teachers, and it's why the legislature was right to say, you bet. $480 million more for teacher pay, but let's make sure there's a performance component as well, so that we're not, maintaining the fiction that the best teacher in Florida and the worst teacher in Florida ought to be paid the same. That's silly. But what we did say in our proviso language was that school districts ought to take into account the difficulty of the teaching assignment in determining performance. And I think, Jeff, that's what you were getting at, that, some classes are more difficult to teach, some situations are more challenging. But the other thing we have to do is lift up teachers and recognize them. And I was talking with a teacher the other day who said, if I could just get more parental support, if I could just get parents to come to parent-teacher conferences, if I could just get performance contracts with parents so that they would support at home what we're doing in the classroom. I think the more of that we can do and the more of that we can encourage, the more likely it is that people will stay in teaching. The issue isn't just getting people to be teachers. The issue is making sure they stay after 3 or 4 or 5 years of getting pummeled in situations where they may not be as appreciated as they ought to be. So we ought to recognize and reward the high performers, and we ought to make sure that we do everything we can to encourage parent participation and insist on parent involvement.
Okay. I want to get 1 or 2 more quick questions in from viewers on education, and then I want to move on to another topic. Question here on education: how do you justify starting merit pay the first year of the PARCC testing the Common Core standards? So we talked about that a little bit, but do you want to elaborate on that, any of you, any more?
Well, I think you justify merit pay by rewarding performance as soon as you see it. Would your viewer have us wait 3 or 4 or 5 years before we recognize a teacher who comes early, stays late, takes on tough challenges, and makes learning gains even against the odds? I'd want to recognize and reward that sooner rather than later.
And here's just kind of a follow-up on that from the same viewer. Do teachers still have to forfeit tenure in order to be eligible for merit pay? If so, why?
If you're under the old, essentially yes. I mean, if you're under the old contract, the career contract, that's in place and you can keep it. My understanding is, unless I'm way off, but if you do want to go with the merit pay system, which I think that great teachers will want to do eventually once they see that their hard work is rewarded, yes, they would leave that old contract and take up the new one.
Okay. Let me throw one more education question at you, and we'll move on to some other. The new math standards, once again, question from a viewer, the new math standards for middle school assume 160 days of instruction. However, we aren't given that many days in the real world, so will this be fixed, and are we and the students being set up to fail?
Well, here's the good news. The good news is that students who are taking the end-of-course algebra exams already, the Algebra 1 exams, we have a 95% pass rate among those that are taking the Algebra Nation exams. So the good news is we're not being set up to fail. It's working.
Okay, fair enough. Gentlemen?
I think what you're seeing at the legislature in the last several years is set up a new structure. You're going to see future legislators give more authority back to the superintendents and the school boards to implement that. And we're going to watch and see how it works. Someone said the good news is that you meet every year, and the bad news is that you meet every year. So we have the ability to make changes as changes are needed, and we'll do that.
Okay. Let me move on to law enforcement. Again, a question from a viewer. What steps can be taken to make law enforcement better trained and more professional statewide? That's a viewer question.
Well, here's the chairman of a committee that dealt with the whole justice issue in the legislature and did a remarkable job. So I think, Clay, this one ought to be yours.
Representative Gaetz on the House side chairs the Criminal Justice Subcommittee, and he deals with a lot of that. And I was able to work. They made me an honorary member because several of my bills dealt with that issue. I think by and large our law enforcement officers are well trained. I think we'll try to make sure that they're funded. Training programs are funded. A lot of the problem that we saw when we came into office is that government spent a whole lot of money on things that had no business being involved in, that weren't constitutionally mandated. I think as we have gone through this period of pruning, as the economy has been bad, the challenge will be to reestablish the legitimate functions of government and fund them well. And so I think we'll need to pay special attention to the training, to making sure that law enforcement has proper equipment and things of that nature. And that is not growing government. That's making sure that the legitimate functions of government are well funded.
Okay.
I think our three sheriffs would be surprised to hear that they're not training there in Santa Rosa, Escambia, and Okaloosa. I think we have a tremendous force that are working hard. They're risking their lives to keep us safe, and I'm very proud of what we've done and what our local officials have done, from the cities to the counties to the state, to make sure that we have an adequate safety net for Florida.
Okay, very good. I'm gonna have to shift back to education just a little bit here, but on a different level, on the college level, because a question came in from a viewer, and it's a good question. Do you feel college professors should be held accountable in the same way school teachers are?
Absolutely. It seems to me that one of the things we ought to do a better job of is ensuring that what we teach and how we teach at the higher education level is as relevant to the economy as we can make it. And that's why I'm so pleased that the University of West Florida, where the three of us were yesterday, is taking very significant steps to change what they're teaching and the way they're teaching so that students earn national industry certifications embedded in their college curriculum. And teachers are held responsible for that. And what the legislature's done is first to codify that in law, and then secondly, provide additional funding for at the college level, at the university level, and at the K-12 level for teachers whose students earn industry certifications that are based on curriculum developed by industry and credentials granted by industry based on assessments done by industry, so that students really walk off the graduation stage and have a better chance to get a real job in the real economy. And that's the real accountability that we need to have in education.
Very good. Gentlemen, like to add anything to that? Or?
Well said. From a nuts and bolts, we're also, this sort of goes without saying, but the way we went about that, it equates to around $1,000 per certificate, as long as that's one of the, cybersecurity, some of the certificate areas that are needed, and so like the senator said, to make sure that those people don't just have a certificate but have a job, will have the ability to get a job, and so the schools are actually incentivized to only produce those graduates in those certificate areas, and they're incentivized with real dollars, and therefore will hire professors and teachers in those areas as well.
Because the unemployment rate in this country is still uncomfortably high, but many business people will tell you, I would love to hire more folks, I just can't find qualified people. And to somewhat it's a structural issue that clearly needs to be addressed.
Jeff, I always use this example. When Hyundai went to build their huge plant south of Montgomery, I don't think they chose that location because Pensacola, Alabama had the most educated, well-rounded workforce in the whole country. I think that the state of Alabama committed to training a workforce, to locating facilities there to train a workforce, and I think the governor and the legislature is something we've done well is with quick response training grants, things of that nature, that we're sort of starting to understand that model, that if you'll bring your business here, we'll commit to get you the resources to train a workforce. And so we will have that infrastructure in place, because no one probably has that trained group of people ready to go to work right away until the thought of some employment is there. And so I think we understand that now.
We're getting short on time, but a couple of topics I do want to cover. Let's talk about BP oil spill money that will be coming in this direction. Senator Gaetz, let me begin with you. Where do we stand with that?
Well, first of all, there is no BP oil spill money that's come through the Restore Act yet. There's no money in the kitty yet. We certainly hope that there will be, and the Congress has already said that that money would come to the Gulf states that were affected. And because of the cooperation of these legislators, we passed the Oil Spill Recovery Act 2 years ago that made sure that 75% of any money that would come from the settlement of the oil spill would come to the 8 coastal counties in Northwest Florida. That comes through the Restore Act passed by Congress. Attorney General Bondi has filed a $5 billion claim on behalf of the state of Florida, not local governments, not individuals, but the state, for our loss of revenue. And I ensured that there was legislation that passed the legislature. The governor has now signed it to make sure 75% of that money would come to Northwest Florida and would be in a 30-year declining endowment that would be earmarked for economic development, education, and environmental restoration. And so that money won't be frittered away in Tallahassee or Washington. It'll be used over time to build a strong third leg under our sustained local economy. And so I think we're expecting, we're hoping that that money will come. But remember, in the Exxon Valdez spill in Alaska, it took, I think, 19 years for all of the claims to be paid out. And so let's not get Saturday night rich here. Let's remember that the money actually has to flow before it can be spent.
Okay, very good.
I think there is confusion about the different pots of money that are going to flow our way. We still are working through the economic plan that originally was handled by Mr. Feinberg and now is handled by a federal judge in New Orleans. Last month, I went over and visited with Pat Juneau, the administrator, to make sure that our businesses and our individuals are being treated fairly here, that there's no prejudice against Florida, and it's not going to Louisiana or Texas or Mississippi or Alabama. And he made that pledge that he will continue to prosecute the claims that are fair and that he will pay out people and reimburse them for their loss. That is a very important part of what's happening right now. There's going to be billions of dollars that will be distributed to our businesses and individuals. And then hopefully once BP settles in the federal court, which is happening in New Orleans, and we determine what the fine's going to be, and based on the formula set up by Congress, Florida is going to do very well, and the 8 impacted counties that Senator Gaetz made sure that we would get 75% of that money. That's going to be great for our area, and I can tell you the legislature is going to make sure that that money is spent properly and it has a financial impact for years and years to our economy.
You guys have been rather outspoken, and I would say most of our viewers would probably say rightfully so, about the frustration with Washington and sort of the gridlock that's going on up there. Obviously, sequestration is going on here. How's it affecting the state of Florida?
Well, I can tell you that Speaker Weatherford and I have been visiting National Guard units, and we've learned that we've got National Guardsmen who are deployed right now in war zones, who will be handed sequester furlough notices on the 8th of July saying, you're going to be welcomed home soon, we're going to pass a resolution, tell you how much we love you, and then we're going to dock your pay and put you on furlough. That's federal dysfunction. That's congressional inaction. And so that's our Florida National Guard, the people who stand on the bridge and protect our lives and our property when there's a hurricane, who come in and help if there's a wildfire. These men and women are now being victimized by the dysfunction in Washington. And I'll have in a few weeks a list, along with Speaker Weatherford, of all the areas in the state government where we relied upon federal funds because the federal government promised us that they'd be there with these funds, and now they're not. Probably a good reason why these 2 members of the House are skeptical about federal funds for Medicaid. And there are going to be effects across the board in health care, in mental health, which one of your viewers called in about, with the federal government pulling back on its obligations because they just can't pass a budget and exercise fiscal discipline. So I would say over the next year or so, we can have significant effects on the Florida budget, significant effects on people who do business with the Florida government, and sadly, It's because the folks in Washington can't get their act together. So Speaker Weatherford and I have asked that our National Guard be exempted from this sequestration furlough because we need them because hurricane season's starting.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I mean, I know probably the most public example is the Blue Angels, and we see the president scheduling vacations and flying to, you know, locales all over the world, and his wife taking a separate plane. That's obviously frustrating when we see, you know, the Blue Angels, again, probably the most public, that crown jewel of military units, something that entices young men and women to join the military, suffer. And then I'm glad the senator hit on this, and then the governor was here a week ago, and you know, when he found out that the National Guard was going to be heavily affected by the sequester right as we enter hurricane season, we're actually putting the public at risk, and that really it's beyond frustrating. It's very upsetting.
I don't think people realize sometimes how embedded we are with the military. I'm on the Veterans Affairs Committee. 65% of the economy of Okaloosa County is in some way directly related to military spending. 35% of Santa Rosa and 35% of Escambia. And we had a workshop a couple weeks ago where we had Whitingfield come and give us an indication of what it's going to mean for their operation. And it's not going to be immediate because they plan a year or 2 years in advance. But if they don't have solutions soon in Washington on how they're going to deal with this issue, it will have an impact on Northwest Florida, and it will be a big impact. And hopefully Washington can come to terms with what needs to be done and do it quickly and do it before the end of the year.
I have about 2 minutes left, and we've talked about a lot of things that are right. We've talked about a lot of things that are wrong or certainly perceived wrong, but I'd like to end on some optimism here. So tell me what, and just quick, like, what are you most optimistic about as we roll through 2013 and into 2014?
By far, Jeff, you know, my first session, Representative Broxson and I, you know, we had no money. The budget was down, and that's because the economy was bad, businesses were suffering, and tax revenues were down. I think because we have money for the first time since we've been elected, it really proves that cutting regulation, cutting taxes, and cutting spending was the way to go, not raising taxes. It's made, you know, the economy better for Floridians. It proves that standing firm was the right thing to do.
Representative Broxson?
Because we made tough decisions. We spent only the money that came in. People are coming back to Florida. Businesses are coming to Florida. They're fleeing the states that took the easy answers and taxed their people, taxed their businesses. Florida did not do that, and now we're beginning to see the benefits of that. So we have some good days ahead.
I have 1 minute left. Senate President Gaetz, I'll let you close it out.
You know, when mom and dad have a job or a better job, things are better at school, they're better in the neighborhood, they're better at home, they're better in the economy. And our governor, Governor Scott, is leading Florida to be one of the top job-producing states in the country. Florida and Texas are leading the country in adding new jobs. And to me, Florida is positioned to be number one, and Northwest Florida is positioned to be the place where Florida's future could really be carved out. We have the opportunity. We have the workforce opportunities. We have the natural resources, I think, to be where Florida's future can really be carved out. So I'm optimistic about our ability to create jobs through the private sector. I think we have a great governor who's leading the way. 3,000 more jobs announced today in a deal with Amazon by this governor. And Northwest Florida, I think, will lead the state, and our state will lead the country.
Very good. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for taking time out of your Thursday evening. Best of luck to you. Hope you have a great summer. And a special thanks to all of our viewers for watching this evening and certainly submitting your questions. Our guests this evening, the Northwest Florida Legislative Delegation, Senate President Don Gaetz, Representative Clay Ingram, and Doug Broxson. Matt Gaetz was scheduled to join us, but unfortunately a last-minute event caused him not to be able to join us. Senator Evers had a scheduling conflict and was unable to do so. Also, as we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, District 2 Representative Clay Ford passed away earlier this year after a long battle with cancer. Again, our condolences to his family. His seat will be filled by Mike Hill, who was elected this past Tuesday in a special election. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you for watching Legislative Review 2013, Dialogue with the Delegation. I hope you have a wonderful and safe evening. We'll see you soon. Good night.